cloudy skies with an overrunning pattern, stratocumulus and stratus covering the skies here in Texas. And we can see that on the surface map. Frontal system has pushed out into the Gulf of Mexico, down into South Texas, and the boundary is running about like that right there. To the north of that, lots of 50s out in West Texas and even 40s around Amarillo and Lubbock. And then we have this band of clouds right there, all the way from Clayton, Trinidad, Roswell, over to Houston and New Orleans. And that's in part due to the continued northerly flow up at 925 and 850 millibars over the cold boundary. That combination of lift and humid conditions in the boundary layer helps generate this overcast cloud that we have today. And in some parts of West Texas, we even have fog there, down to less than a mile in fog at Junction. Now, quite often, this is a very favorable pattern for elevated storms. All you need is a good supply of moisture off the surface flowing northward and good shear, and maybe a little bit of lift from the upper levels, a little bit of instability from 700 up to 500, but we don't quite have that today. And there's the temperature map with those cold temperatures, and if we look at that sounding, you can see that in this layer right here, that's where we generate the elevated storms. The lapse rates are a little bit steep right there. Enough moisture maybe to support some elevated storms. Most unstable layer, 1100 joules per kilogram. So we could probably support a few elevated storms in this pattern. And yes, we do have storms on visible imagery. Can't see them very well. But switching over to the infrared, yep, there they are. Little cluster of thunderstorms there from Seymour down to Abilene, and this looks like around to maybe San Saba, Lampasas. You can see that on the composite radar. Bring up the interstates there, and yeah, quite a little mess of elevated storm activity. And that'll probably be in the Dallas area later this afternoon. The only thing that would really stop it is the influx of dry air in the lower levels, and also as you move further to the east, that cold air mass gets deeper and deeper, and you start cutting yourself off from the 925 and 850 millibar moisture. So I'm not too sure that these are going to move much further to the east. And the high-resolution rapid refresh does kind of bear that out. As they get towards Arkansas, Louisiana, just kind of a weakening trend there overnight. And the surface map, let's check that out before we get too much further. To tell you the truth, I almost analyzed yesterday's GFS with today's data because the pattern has been very slow to change. Still have that boundary down there in the Gulf Coast with a stormy pattern out there in the Rockies. However, looks like the cold air has made more progress into the central U.S., and we see those 40s and 50s coming down a lot further into the country. Little occlusion up there in the northeast U.S., so things are unsettled in the Hudson Bay, or I should say the Hudson River Valley. And let's see what else is going on. Little burst of cold air into Utah and eastern Nevada. We do have some snow out there still in Ontario, and we are expecting snow to start developing in Kansas later tonight. We've already got some snow coming down out there in Rapid City and around the Scottsbluff area, and even back into much of Wyoming. Pretty weird weather for mid-April. And then going further north, doesn't look too bad up there. Looks like things are slowly warming. I don't see very much below zero weather except way up there near Resolute and Bathurst Island, that region. But a little bear clinic system coming together in the Northwest Territories and in Yukon. Anyway, the dominant feature that I'm seeing here is this big 1030 millibar high. This is basically a complex of highs right there. Wish I had a good shading tool on here, but Yeah, this entire region right here, this is a cold air source region, and that's driving quite a volume of cold air into the U.S. down to the south. And then we go to the dynamics. Now, we went over the continental upper air pattern yesterday, and we were seeing a large ridge out west with the series of troughs in the continental U.S. itself. So that kind of leaves us with this jet stream pattern like that. The four corners, a jet max coming through that area approaching Colorado, and then part of that jet rounds this ridge and then extends into the eastern U.S. Don't have that drawn very well, but that's it right there. So some jet stream energy up there in Pennsylvania and West Virginia supporting that other system. So going strictly off our rule of thumb, the upstream trough, downstream ridge, and the jet stream positions, we would expect to find a front roughly like this. And then the other system, we're looking for a orientation somewhat like that. And this also tells us some of the best lift is going to be on the left front quad of the jet max. Right in that area, we would see the pressure falls, cyclogenesis, and then the same thing up in this region here in Pennsylvania and New York. Certainly a very spectacular pattern in the Four Corners area on the visible satellite. So what are we seeing here? Well, there's a couple different features. One is going to be this area of low cloud here. That's associated with that cold air advection and upslope into the flat areas of Colorado, Denver, Lyman, and Colorado Springs. And we got to keep in mind, we got to know our geography. The mountain ranges are going to be located right there. That's the Front Range and part of the Rockies itself, the Sangre de Cristos. And there's other mountains further back in this region here and others in Utah. And this whole area here, this is kind of a large plateau with some smaller mountain ranges, some buttes, that kind of thing. And so what we're seeing here, superimposed on that cold air advection upslope further to the east, we have this vast area of dry air advection, subsidence. That's going to be the dry slot in the rear of that cyclone. And keep in mind the upper level flow. Remember, we had this jet max running about like that. The jet stream itself, about like that. Most of the better dynamic lift in this area here, and we can certainly see that in the cloud field. See how that towering cumulus and shallow cumulonimbus, looks like a couple of maybe organized lines moving through that region, producing some showers, maybe some graupel coming down to the surface in those higher elevations. And then as you go further to the south, you get more into the dry air in the wake of the system. And then further to the northwest in Utah, this is going to be associated with a cold pool. This is more directly within that upper level low. So it's going to be very cold in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. Not as much moisture associated with these cells here. However, steep lapse rates. So what moisture there is will be in an unstable environment. Here's a plot of 500 millibar temperatures, the shading indicating temperatures, and that's the cold pool right there. We can see that at this time it's over western Utah. And looking down at the scale at the very bottom, that's going to be associated with these minus 25 to minus 27 temperatures at 500 millibars. And let's bring up a sounding, see what that profile looks like. And you can see that the lapse rate's not quite dry adiabatic, but certainly very steep, with a low tropopause, only at about 25,000 feet. So even though the conditions are very, very cold in the boundary layer, they are very humid, so it's not going to take much lift to get convection going. A quick look at the hazards for this afternoon. Red flag warning due to these high winds, very low relative humidities, and the fact that the vegetation is not really green yet. Also, 2 winter storm warnings, one there in Nebraska and around Cheyenne, and the other in New Hampshire and western Maine, with a winter weather advisory around both of those. And then a frost warning That's in Kentucky there, and then flood warnings with that rainy pattern there around New Orleans. And as far as convective hazards, slight risk there for central Texas with those elevated storms marching eastward across the big country into North Texas. And a little sliver of a severe watch box from Brady to Eden down to San Saba with the tail end of that complex where it has better access to the elevated moisture inflow. What about weather elsewhere around the world? Why don't we take a look? Well, it looks like Europe still having problems with cold weather as well. You can see a big old 1035, 1040 millibar high across the North Sea into Scandinavia, some snow coming down in southwestern Poland, and this cold pool across much of Germany and France and down into the Balkans. So yeah, that definitely spells cold weather. And down in the Mediterranean, we can see that pressure gradient down here. Looks like the baroclinic low out there near Tunisia, way down to the south. Cold front down in that region. So this is the main baroclinic zone, and Europe itself just a little bit too far north, and even that low right there looks like an old occlusion. And we'll just take a quick look, see how things evolve. High pressure really doesn't break down very much, just kind of a stagnant weather pattern going into next week. And then, yeah, it looks like even the Atlantic not opening up. Typically we see a progression of systems moving west to east this time of year, but I think there's probably a built-up upper-level high or maybe a blocking pattern, something like that going on. And another cold high settles in over the UK and Scandinavia. So once again, back to the deep freeze there. Although, at least the precipitation is still liquid. But yeah, we're really getting hammered with some of these winter systems, and I think that's going to make the transition to May quite a surprise. And we'll see what's going on there in Asia. They've got a little winter weather system up there in far northwest China. So drawing the systems, well, I think that might be occluded. I think the main baroclinic system is down in North Korea and then up to the north in occlusion. But that's one system right there. Looks like a very strong system in Russia up there near Novosibirsk. And we've got this tropical cyclone in April. It's kind of a little bit early for that to be going on. That's probably going to be heading into the Philippines. Yeah, there it goes right there. And yeah, the model is going for 925. That's quite a strong typhoon, but it recurves that up to the north. So I guess that'll bear watching next week. How about Africa? We never look at the weather there. Nobody looks at the weather in Africa. I don't know why, but they do get some interesting weather going on. The main baroclinic zone up there to the north, up there in Tunisia and Algeria, and the intertropical convergence zone. Where do we expect that this time of year? Well, this is just after the equinox, so I would expect to find that there's usually about a 1 to 2 month lag with the band of maximum solar heating. So I think that's going to put it right over the equator. So that right there, those showers, thunderstorms, that's likely the intertropical convergence zone. And they are going to be descending into cooler weather down in South Africa. So that's kind of the overall pattern driving things, and we can see what looks like a strong high pressure area coming into the southern part of Africa. That's a little bit of cold air advection working into that region. And going into next week, kind of a quiet weather pattern, but I can see some of that cold air driving into Libya and Algeria there. So Europe sharing some of the wealth as far as cold weather. And then South America, the equator running right through here. Intertropical convergence zone just a little bit to the north of that area. And let's see, kind of a quiet weather pattern to start off with. A few thunderstorms there north of Uruguay. And going forward, nothing too interesting except for this one strong cold front coming into Chile on Sunday. I don't think I have that drawn right. Yeah, it's going to be about like that. And you can see what looks like a couple of bands of strong showers and storms moving inland. You can see those working inland, so a bit stormy there. And, okay, now this is interesting. Yeah, whatever that is pops up around the 18th or 19th. Tropical cyclones in that part of the world are very rare. And yeah, it's certainly got something coming together there. Drifting off the coast of Brazil, not really doing much. So I would watch the news for whatever that is. And then Australia transitioning into fall, so it's about the equivalent of October 15th in the US. But it's covered by kind of a cool high pressure area. And let's see, just not very much going on. A little bit of cold air advection around Melbourne and Adelaide towards 22nd, 23rd. And a few showers working up into the Gold Coast region. So Australia looks dry. However, we can see a little bit of weather coming together there in New Zealand. They're going to be one of the first to feel the effects with the transition into their austral fall. Very strong cold front moving in right there with some showers and storms around the 25th. You can see that moving right into the island. Some snow in the higher elevations, so some stormy weather there around the 26th, 27th. So that's your show for today. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you again tomorrow for the Friday edition. Until then, have a great one. Bye-bye.